everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is another update in the Delphi case. As you may or may not know, we just went to trial. So, jury selection is completed, jurors have been sworn in, and now we are finally on the trial itself. So, this next portion of my series is going to be the trial of Richard Allen in the Delphi case. So this is Indiana versus Richard Allen. We are going to go over day one, opening statements, and testimony that followed that. So we're going to go over what happened on Friday, October 18th, which was the first day that the court proceedings were underway. So if you don't mind, please hit the like on this video if you don't mind. That helps with the algorithm. All right, so let's get started. Up first, so we have obviously we don't have video, we don't have audio, but I'm going to go over notes with you guys that people who are boots on the ground are going to be providing. So there's a repository where everybody that is actually attending the trial is going to be putting their notes and things like that. So we're able to gather information from the trial based on notes from people that we can trust to report pretty accurately. So up first, I have some notes. I think most of these were done by Andrea Burkhart, but I'm not sure. I know the opening statements and some of these notes are, but I'm not sure if she did them all. There's multiple content creators that are attending trial and rotating out when people get to go and take notes and whatnot. So not sure exactly who wrote everything, but thank you to all of those individuals that were attending. Um, and then so it might not always be notes, it might be tweets. So some people might be tweeting different things throughout the day. They're still not allowed to have their cell phones with them, so they're able to tweet on the break some of their notes back during the day. So we're able to get some information that way too. So I'm kind of going to mix it up. I'm getting my information from all sorts of sources, and I'm trying to figure out for you guys which is the best source. And even though we don't have audio, we don't have video, I think it's really important that we talk about this case because for some reason Judge Gull wants it to be secretive. Everything about it she wants to keep under wraps and secret for some reason, and she will not allow cameras in her courtroom, even though she was the pioneer of starting cameras in courtrooms in her area, in her county. So that makes zero sense to me. I really think that they're trying to hide something. So I mean, if you if you weren't hiding something, you would want or be okay with transparency, but I guess that's not the way it is. All right, so let's get started. This is Nick McClelland's opening statement. I heard he only talked for about 13 minutes, which is probably pretty telling as to how much evidence he actually has on Rick Allen. I believe the opening statement from Richard Allen's defense attorney, Andrew Baldwin, I believe he took about an hour. But again, we don't know. We're just getting this from sources that are boots on the ground. All right, so let's get into this. Sorry, I'm just going to read as is. It's very, bullet pointy, but this is what we have. So apologies. So here's Nick McClelland's opening statement. He wanted to play a video, but it didn't work. So after 5 minutes, he scratched the idea, which I kind of find pretty funny. You've been working on this high profile case for how long now? And all of a sudden you get there and you can't even play your equipment on opening statement day. That looks pretty bad. Largely, it was a recap of a mini opening. Oh, because during their jury voir dire, everybody got to say a little mini opening to the jurors, just to kind of tell them what the case is going to be about. So it was a mostly a recap of what he said during the jury voir dire. So he told the jury a couple days ago that the case is about a bullet, bridge guy, and the brutal homicide of two girls. Now the jury gets to hear the rest of the story. Well, the rest of the public wants to know the rest of the story too and how you got to Richard Allen. So everything's been under wraps. There's been a seal, everything's been, filed under seal, or there's a gag order, and people aren't allowed to talk about any of the details of this case. So we've been largely speculating on a lot of things based on court filings. So now we finally get to hear the real story, but I don't think we're going to hear it from Nick McClelland. All right, so, but this is his story. This is the state's theory. February 13th was an unseasonably warm day and the girls were off of school, sorry. The girls asked Kelsey, the oldest sister, to go to the bridge, but she had to work. So Kelsey drove the girls to the trail. Libby was in the front seat and Abby was in the back seat. Libby took a selfie in the car on the way to the trails. This photo was shown to the jury. Kelsey dropped them off at the Mears parking lot. Abby didn't have a phone, but Libby had a phone. Libby's phone was set up so that Abby's fingerprint could unlock Libby's phone. And uh, just, we need to keep this in mind. Just, put it in the backs of our minds for later because again, the prosecution only talked for 13 minutes, but they felt that it was important enough to tell us that Abby had a fingerprint access to Libby's phone. So Libby took a photo of Abby on the bridge and posted it to Snapchat. Libby crossed the bridge first, looked back, and saw a man following Abby, so Libby decided to record. The man told them down the hill. The girls complied, and the video cut off. So they heard someone say down the hill, a man's voice, and video cuts off. The search for the girls was suspended at approximately 2 a.m. and resumed again at 6 a.m. So remember, the whole community was out there searching for the girls in this area. So how they could have been missed is just beyond comprehension to me. Libby was found not until the next morning, nude, covered in blood. Her throat was cut in several places, and there was blood on the ground and on a nearby tree. Abby was wearing her own underwear and shoes, but no socks, and she happened to have on Libby's shirt and jeans. So the rest of the rest of Abby's clothes and the rest of Libby's clothes were thrown in Deer Creek, which, with the exception of one shoe. Sorry. So everything else was thrown in the creek with the exception of one shoe and Libby's phone, which was found under Abby. Hold on, my dog. Come on. Hazel. Okay. Sorry. Where was I? So yeah, so one shoe and Libby's phone were on the ground. Under Abby was the phone. All right, so there was an unspent 40 caliber Winchester bullet between the two girls. Unspent 40 caliber Winchester bullet between the two girls. Libby's phone was taken for processing and they recovered the photos and video of Bridge Guy. Witnesses began to come forward. Three girls on the trail who took a photo on a bench located east of Freedom Bridge. The three girls ran into an unfriendly man who was walking with a purpose. The state says this man is Bridge Guy. So, Bridge Guy is the guy supposedly in the video. And supposedly This is Bridge Guy. These three, there were three other girls. They were mentioned in the probable cause affidavit, I believe. These three girls that ran into this unfriendly man. And I believe these are the three girls that Richard Allen actually did see when he was there. He ran into a group of girls, which was not two, not a pair of girls. It was more than three. I mean, more than two. All right, so the three girls ran into the unfriendly man walking with a purpose. This is Bridge Guy. Betsy Blair, remember, saw a man on the platform of the bridge who is also Bridge Guy. Sarah Carbow saw a man walking on the side of the road looking like he had just slaughtered a pig. This is also Bridge Guy, according to the state. Years passed and they reviewed an old report of a DNR officer who interviewed Rick in 2017. Rick said he arrived at the trails at 1:30 p.m. and left at 3:30 p.m. During his time there, he ran into three girls. Liggett thought if they found the three girls, then he would have to be Bridge Guy. He would have to be Bridge Guy. Why? There were lots of people out that day. It was a nice day. They called Richard Allen to interview him again in 2022, and he said that he was wearing a blue or black Carhartt jacket and jeans. And they searched his home and found a .40 caliber gun, the clothes, and some knives. They tested the bullet, and it came from Richard Allen's gun. Again, how on earth, what science are they using that they're saying it came from Richard Allen's gun? The problem is people just inherently think that law enforcement, prosecutors, people of authority know what they're talking about and they're honest. So to say that they tested the bullet and it came back from Richard Allen's gun is totally disingenuous because that's not even the way you would say it. When the individual, your experts on the stand, they have to say within a certain reasonable degree of certainty, blah, blah, blah. They have to say certain words because they can't say definitively, I can tell you that this is from Richard Allen's gun. So, yeah. And that's my thought process is just I'm worried that because it's coming from the prosecutor and law enforcement, some jurors might just be like, okay, well, I guess it's from the gun. They tested it. But we need to really refute that testing. And it's an awareness for all of us when we're watching trials that we need to really scrutinize experts to make sure that you're not putting an innocent man away. All right, so they interviewed Richard Allen again and had no explanation how his bullet got on the scene he was arrested. Yeah, it's that easy. He went to law enforcement to help, to say, here's some things that I saw while I was there, in case that helps you with your case. Little did he know that 7 years later, after that interview, they just come along and arrest him and say, you did it, we think. So stupid. So they interviewed Richard Allen again, no explanation. He was arrested. While incarcerated, he told investigators what they already knew. He took the lives of Abby and Libby. He gave details, how and why. These were not from an interrogation. They were volunteered and spontaneous. These contained details only the perpetrator would know. The perpetrator hid in plain sight for 5 years. He was going to have his way with them and was interrupted. This is the state's theory now, that he was going to essay them. But somebody was nearby, he heard somebody, so he decided instead that he forced them to cross the stream and then he took their lives. That's the state's theory. There's really not a whole lot there, as you can see. Moving on, let's go to Andrew Baldwin's opening statement. Richard Allen is completely innocent. There will be reasonable doubt from the evidence and the lack of evidence. He asked the jury to wait for him. The defense wants the truth to come out in court and for the jury and the families to see what the truth is. The truth is that the investigation was messed up from the beginning and up to as recently as the last few days. In the beginning, evidence was lost. I'm really curious what these up to the last few days parts mean, what that part means. In the beginning, evidence was lost. Key witness interviews are gone forever, and they didn't even write down the names of people they interviewed, like Brad Holder, Jesse Messer, all of those people. Johnny Messer, um, Patrick Westphal, Elvis Fields, Ned Abrams, or no, I'm sorry, Ned Smith, Rod Abrams, mixing their names together. All of those individuals who somehow their interrogations, their videos were just rewritten over. They just rewound the tape and recorded over it. How you do that in a police office, I don't know. Don't know. I think that's deliberate. At the very least, it's neglect um, and incompetence. All right, so there's no way to recreate some of the early investigative steps that law enforcement took. Months later, they lost more interviews from a period of time from April 29th, 2017 through June 2nd, 2017. In the middle of the investigation, they got into a turf war with the FBI and kicked them out. That's news. I didn't know that. They told the FBI to get out of here. I knew the FBI had been working with them, but I didn't know why they had stopped. The FBI assisted with the extraction of Libby's phone, and police kicked the FBI out before discussing the FBI's findings from that extraction. That's weird. You don't want you take the FBI's help, but then you say, "No, we're good here. You don't need to see what the findings are. You can just go." Ay, ay, ay. And they wonder why they look suspicious. All of them. All right. So as of 2 days ago, law enforcement is scrambling because there is a hair in Abby's hand. So what does this mean? I think so. We learned day one. This was brand new news that there was a hair in Abby's hand. It was wrapped around her fingers and had a root. DNA was extracted from it. The analyst testified that the hair, or the analyst will testify that the hair might be from a relative of Libby. It is not Libby's hair, it's not Abby's hair, but it is female. They still need to complete the testing. So that's what they mean by they're still scrambling right now to figure out who this hair belongs to. I don't think they knew maybe that there was a hair, or maybe they didn't know that the defense knew that there was a hair, but surprise, we knew there was a hair. So they still need to complete the testing. They will test mom, grandma, sister, somebody like that to be able to tell if it's the family of Libby or someone else. So it's in Abby's hand. She was wearing Libby's clothes, but it's not Libby's hair. It's curious, huh? So in 7 years, they never turned in Becky or Kelsey's DNA to see if it matches. They had the DNA, but didn't turn it in. Amazing, right? We don't have the results back yet, but are hoping to soon. So during trial, hopefully, we will find out whose hair that belongs to. Truth can come out on a phone. That's part of the defense's theme. Baldwin had a phone he continued to show to the jury. Forensic data on phones doesn't lie or cheat. People do. Um, People can be incorrect, and people can try to manipulate evidence to make it look a different way than what it really is. So he's making a huge point to say the going phone data is going to show that my client didn't do this, and it's not, phone data is concrete. You can trust it. So when you find out what's on Libby's phone, the state's case is going to start to fall apart. There were a couple of guys from the Indiana State Police who were in charge of phone dumps and data, but they were ill equipped to understand it. It's important because this phone data is accurate and reliable and is going to be incredibly important. He asked the jury to hold the state to their theory of the case because he contends that they are going to have to change it as the evidence comes out. So, as things start to unfold throughout the trial, just like in the Karen Reed case, the prosecution's theory is going to crumble. All of their timelines and everything is going to fall apart. So, that's good for the defendant. The state's theory is that Abby and Libby were deceased by 4 p.m. at the latest on 2/13/2017. They didn't they don't move, the phone doesn't move. Their lives were taken and bodies left abandoned and left in place, and that phone was under Abby's body the whole time according to the state. The phone's under Abby the whole time from 3:30 to 4 p.m. until they were discovered around noon the following day. State says Richard Allen arrived and parked at the CPS lot around 1:30. The route that the state claims he took is odd, and there's no good reason to take that route. That he drove that way, or that he drove in a normal way. I don't know what that means. All right. So, according to the state, the car is parked there until sometime after 4 p.m. when Richard left. Once Richard left, he didn't come back to the crime scene and he didn't take Libby's phone with him. Richard was never on the trail at the same time as Abby and Libby, according to the defense. Witnesses describe a guy called Bridge Guy as 5'11", which does not fit Richard's description. Richard arrived to the trails around noon or 12:30 p.m. and he was gone from the trails by 1:30 p.m., which is about the time that the girls were starting to arrive. He was leaving. Richard's car is gone by 2:15 p.m. Betsy Blair drove past the CPS lot around 2:15 p.m. and she saw one vehicle there, a Mercury Comet, that looked the same as the one her dad had in the 1960s. So this is like an old classic car, I think. Or at least like it's an odd car. It's not like a Ford Focus, which is what Richard Allen drove, and she clearly knows the difference between a Ford Focus and the vehicle that her father had in the 1960s. So she's pretty clear on that. Camera at the Hoosier Harvest Store shows Kelsey, this is Libby's sister, dropping her off at 1:49. So Richard Allen is gone by 1:30. So if Kelsey's dropping them off at 1:49 p.m., Richard Allen has already been gone for 19 minutes. But yeah, he's been sitting in prison for 2 years for this. Ow. The girls were on the trail right after Betsy Blair. They basically followed Betsy Blair down the trail to the bridge. The girls passed Betsy Blair as Betsy was coming back from the bridge. At 2:05 p.m., the girls were on the bridge. Close to halfway across the bridge, Libby was ahead. She turned around and took a picture of Abby at 2:07 p.m. At 2:13 p.m., the abduction happens at the end of the bridge and is caught on video. The video is not panoramic, so you don't see much. You can't see the water or end of the bridge. You hear a voice telling the girls to go down the hill. But the man on the video, his mouth doesn't move. Therefore, the defense contends that there is more than one person. At the end of the bridge, you have the choice to go right or left. They went left down a steep incline. We don't know and can't show which way they went down for sure, but either way they would have landed on an access road that goes under the bridge. The access road leads all the way to the home of a man named Brad Weber. It's possible there were other people or a vehicle making use of this access driveway. Evidence suggests that the girls may have gotten into a vehicle down there on that access road. Really. So they might have even gotten into somebody's vehicle. They might have been meeting up. This is why this is so important. The phone forensics is so important because who are they talking to? Who are they meeting up with? This might, I'm teenage girls maybe talking to boys online and not, thinking it's no big deal and, not telling parents and going and meeting them and yeah, something bad could happen in that situation. I don't know if that's what happened. I'm just saying they could have met someone there. They could have been meeting someone and knew to go down there. I don't know. Or maybe the abductors had a car down there. We don't know. Evidence suggests that the girls may have gotten into the vehicle and down at that access road. There is not strong evidence about what happened. Data from Libby's phone shows that she was connected to a tower and getting messages and text messages until 5:44 p.m., at which point the phone no longer connected. Okay, so Libby's phone stops connecting after 5:44 p.m. At 4:33 a.m., Libby's phone suddenly reconnects. So, what happened with the phone between 5:44 p.m. and 4:33 a.m. the next day that it was disconnected from any cell tower signal? Defense theory is that this is when the phone came back into the area. After 4 p.m., when Richard Allen left, data will show human hands handled Libby's phone. It registered human hands handling it. The last ping of her phone was at 5:44 p.m. They continue to try to ping the phone every 15 minutes. Around 10 p.m., investigator Mullen contacts Mitch Walker at Indiana State Police, who said that the phone wasn't in working order or was out of the service area. The phone was found in working order. Therefore, it had to have been out of the service area. Do you see? Had to have been out of the area. At 4:33 a.m., 15 texts come through to Libby's phone. So I'm sure she didn't get all 15 texts right at 4:33 a.m. All of the ones that stopped coming into her phone after 5:44 p.m. because she was no longer connected all started to ping in her phone at 4:33 when it came back to the service area. The search party will establish that the girls were not where they were found. Fire Chief Starrett was part of the search. His area to search was across the creek from the area where the bodies should have been. There was a grid search. Chief Starrett will testify that he saw flashlights from people searching across the creek from him, which in the general area was where the bodies were ultimately found. So there were people searching the same area where the girls' bodies were later found the next morning, which means the girls were not there. They were taken out of the area or they left the area on their own accord, one or the other, and brought back into the area at some point in time. Whether they were alive or not at the second time they were brought into the area, that is yet to be determined. So the girls were found in a flat area, which is a natural area for people to walk if they were searching in the dark. I personally think they were taken from the area and then brought back at like a weird time at night, sometime before 4:33 a.m. Maybe they went out there at like 1, 2 a.m. and did some kind of sacrifice, some ritual, and then, they were done by 3 a.m. and cheering and whatever they were doing, sacrificing for power and money and greed and whatever else they do it for. The girls were found in a flat area. We talked about that. The girls' clothes were found in the creek. However, many people were searching the creek prior to that time and no one found the clothes. So that's another good point. So not only were the girls' bodies not found, and this particular chief said that he saw flashlights in the area where the bodies were found that night. Um, and then we're also learning that no one saw the girls' clothes in the creek during the search the day before either. So these things happened most likely after searches were concluded that night. And then once people came back out searching the next morning, the task had already been done and the girls' bodies were found. So the girls were found in a flat area, which is a natural area for people to walk if they were searching in the dark. The girls' clothes were found in the creek. Um, Many people were searching the creek prior to that time and no one found the clothes. Holman, who's our lead detective, Jerry Holman, will testify that from where the girls were found, you could hear voices on the bridge, and four people would have been walking on the bridge at that time of the abduction slash homicide, yet they heard nothing. So this area is very like sound carries all throughout this area, is there what they're going to say. And you could hear throughout during the day, you would be able to hear voices, you would hear screaming, you would hear people walking on the bridge. So you can hear all that. It's rustling footsteps. You can hear it because the noise just carries from where you are. So these four people heard no screams. The people that were walking on the bridge this day at the time where the homicides would have taken place, according to the state's theory. There were four people that heard no screams, heard no talking, and heard no rustling like footsteps or some kind of assault or, something taking place. The bullet and the confessions mean nothing when the phone data says otherwise. If we rely on the hard data, none of the other stuff matters. It's true because things can be planted, experts can be bought, testimony can be paid for. You're going to see videos of Richard Allen in his cell where he was watched 24 hours per day. You're going to see the conditions he was in. Richard Allen went into prison fragile to begin with, and the videos will be upsetting. Within 2 weeks of arriving to prison, Richard Allen told his uncle not to send money and not hire a lawyer. He said, "Maybe I'll just admit to all of it so you don't have to suffer." It was heartbreaking to hear that. 6 months later, the confessions begin. He says he shot the girls, but the girls were not shot. Defense experts will say that this has all the ingredients for this to be, for all of these confessions to be false confessions. So they'll get into that with their experts on the stand. Andrew Baldwin addresses the magic bullet in the ground. There was no photo or video of the bullet being recovered or retrieved. There is only one photo of the bullet in place, then photo of the lab. Then photo of the bullet in the lab. So there's only one photo of the bullet on the ground and then one of the bullet in the lab. So that's not a lot of evidence regarding that piece of evidence that you collect. Law enforcement in this area commonly used .40 caliber ammunition. They also commonly have Sig Sauer brand handguns. It's possible the police dropped a bullet, but nobody asked. Nobody asked if anybody lost a bullet that day during their search for the girls. It could have been dropped the day before during the search. It could have been there prior to the girls even being placed in that spot. It's possible to test law enforcement's guns against the bullet found, but no one did that either. So they only tested against Richard Allen's gun. And this Brad Weber. Brad Weber had a .40 caliber Sig Sauer in his vehicle. This was tested and not excluded as a source of the bullet. Not excluded, meaning it could be the bullet that they found. Could have come from his gun, the uncycled round. Dr. Warren will be critical of the bullet testing and process. There are markings on the magic bullet, not from being shot, but only from being cycled through the gun. There were sufficient markings on the bullet to do an analysis. What they did for the testing is they took a pristine bullet and cycled it through Richard Allen's gun. That process produced markings that were not sufficient for comparison. They then fired the bullet to try to get more markings, which is not the same as an unspent round. So, what's the point of that? But okay. Once they fired the bullet, they then were able to compare the markings on the shell casing to the unfired bullet found on the ground. Based on that, that is why they're saying they can match it to Richard Allen's firearm. That makes absolutely no sense. So you cycled it through without firing it, and it wasn't sufficient for comparison. So then you fire it, and now I've got the tool markings I need to compare. What? It's supposed to be an unfired round. So why would you fire it to compare? Yeah, makes no sense to me. The problem is that it is not comparing apples to apples, it's comparing apples to oranges. Our own eyeballs can look at the pictures of the two bullets and see that they don't match. Lots of markings are consistent between guns because guns are manufactured in bulk by the same machines. Therefore, the magic bullet is of no value. And Andrea Burkhart went on to say some more about this magic bullet. Um, this magic bullet in particular. I don't know. I think she must have said it on her show, but I thought it was good, so I will add it here. So the magic bullet, he's describing it. This is the defense term for it. The magic bullet was found in the ground. There was no photo or video of anything of the bullet being recovered, being retrieved out of the ground. There's just apparently a single photograph of it being in place and then nothing else until the bullet is in the lab. So you don't see the process of it being removed from the ground. It's a very interesting piece of information. The law enforcement in the area commonly use 40 caliber ammunition and they commonly have Sig Sauer brand firearms as well. So it's possible that police dropped a bullet, but nobody asked. It's possible to test the police officers' guns, but that didn't happen either. Brad Weber, the homeowner who lived on the far side of the creek at the end of the driveway, also had a 40 caliber Sig Sauer in his vehicle. They tested that gun and it was not excluded as being the source of the bullet. So he could be your perpetrator. Now this really just gets back to the whole issue with ballistics that I've been going on and on about, since this case really captured my attention. Because of because if we're going to say the science is so good that we can identify this bullet as coming exclusively from Mr. Allen's gun, that means by necessity we can exclude the rest of the universe of firearms. Exactly. You can't do that. They could not have produced it, which you can't test like you really have to do good testing and you would need like a large pool to test. And they don't do that when they're testing ballistics. Only Mr. Allen's gun can have produced it. But lo and behold, upon testing, we can't exclude this other 40 caliber Sig Sauer that happens to be in the neighborhood does tend to undermine the testing a little bit in my eyes. The test itself, he indicated they'll call Dr. Warren to be critical of the testing process. So he described a little bit of the process. The bullet had markings on it, but it had not been shot from the firearm. It had merely been cycled through, but it had sufficient markings on it to be able to do an analysis. Problem sometimes with something like an unspent bullet is it just might have a mark on it like from the magazine or from loading, but it's just not enough to be able to distinguish it from other guns, from other markings. You typically need a combination of things: the firing pin, the markings from the injectment. I mean, just like stuff like that will help them have more points of comparison. So I had sufficient markings on this bullet to be able to make a comparison. So the testing, what they did for this process, they took us a pristine bullet and they cycled it through Richard Allen's gun just like they would, their theory is that the gun, this bullet, would have been cycled through his gun. And the problem is that the pristine bullet produced the produced markings that were not sufficient for a comparison. So it didn't even create something that you could compare, which is your exemplar. So they then fired the bullet to try to get more markings on it and see what happened. Once they fired the bullet, they are able to compare the markings on the shell casing to the bullet that was in the ground. And so, based on that, that's why they're saying they can match it to Richard Allen's firearm. Does anybody else feel like they're in the twilight zone here? That's not how ballistics works, but okay. The problem is there are not these are not apples and apples, these are apples and oranges. They are being compared because the bullet on the ground had never been fired. So the cycling was not enough to produce the markings that were present on the bullet found in the ground. Mr. Baldwin also says that our own eyeballs will be able to look at the photographs and see that these two don't match. He described very quickly subclasses, the idea that a manufacturer is going to produce guns that will make similar markings because they're similar makes. They have similar mechanisms. They come from similar machines that they're made from. They're probably made on the same machines and stuff like that, like we talked about yesterday. So this must be what she was saying on her live stream. So he argues that the magic bullet is of no value. He brings up Melissa Oberg, the analyst who is no longer with the ISP, but will testify that she has done over 1,300 comparisons and she has never been wrong. Never been wrong before in her life, guys. But the other people that she has supervised, they have. She's peer reviewed their work. They've made mistakes, but she never did. So, according to the defense, they, the state, have a magic bullet, but we have other evidence. We have the hard evidence, and he's showing the jury the phone at that time. So he's saying, don't pay attention to the bullet science because it's not real science. Pay attention to um, the phone data. All right, so where did I leave off there? Okay, the magic bullet. Melissa Oberg is the analyst who did the testing, but is no longer with ISP. She will testify that she has done 1,100, 1,300 comparisons, and she has never been wrong before, except the people that she supervised before have been wrong. Betsy Blair arrives around 1:49 p.m., which is right before Kelsey drops off the girls. Betsy describes the bridge guy as early 20s, maybe 30, with brown, fluffy hair. She sees him on the bridge 50 feet away from her. Richard Allen was sworn, uh, Richard Allen has worn his hair short since 1989. It looks kind of like a buzz cut. Something most notable about Richard Allen is that he's small, short stature. Betsy Blair said nothing about the man that she saw being short. Betsy Blair saw a bridge guy before the homicides. Sarah Carbaugh saw him after the homicides. Sarah's story has been inconsistent. In 2017, when she spoke to police, Sarah Carbaugh told them that the guy she saw wore a tan jacket and was muddy. This was the extent of her description. When Sarah Carbaugh spoke to police in 2019 after the bridge guy video and still photo was released, she changes this to the man was wearing a blue jacket and he was bloody like he slaughtered a pig. No DNA of Richard Allen is at the crime scene. No social media connection between the girls or the scene and Richard Allen. No digital connection between the girls or the scene and Richard Allen. No forensic data connecting Richard Allen to anything. It has taken the state 7 years to figure out whose hair is on her hand. Mr. Baldwin is clearly highly offended by this. Um, Mr. Baldwin is clearly, this is Andrea's opinion, that he's offended that it's taken 7 years to figure out the hair. Well, yeah, when it could exculpate your client and you're sitting there like, why haven't you tested this hair in their hand? A forensic pathologist is going to say that it looks like two different blades were used, one serrated and one non serrated. In Richard Allen's confessions, he stated he took the lives of the girls with a box cutter. So that is not the same as knives that were used, one serrated, one non. Defense theory is that this is supportive of evidence that more than one person was involved with the multiple knives. The down the hill voice was not matching the lips that were moving, so that's another reason why they think that there's more than one person involved. When you see the crime scene, you'll understand that it's highly unlikely one person could have done this. At this point, Judge Gull, of course, interrupts without an objection from the state and tells Mr. Baldwin that he is veering into argument. Shut up, Gull. He did not. He said, when you see the crime scene, you'll understand that it's highly unlikely one person could have done this. That's not argument, is it? I don't know. Maybe slightly. The crime scene was a bizarre scene. There were sticks on the girls. When law enforcement began the investigation, they originally thought more than one person did this and that it wouldn't be feasible for one person to commit this crime. Please wait, Richard Allen is really innocent. And that's how he ends his um, statements there. So, pretty powerful. I thought that was good. Good stuff. A lot of stuff we already knew, a lot of stuff we did not know, which has some surprising, some surprise factor to it because there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of details we didn't know because it's been such a, everything's been kept under seal so tightly. All right, so we have up next is Becky Patty was the first person to first witness to take the stand, and Becky Patty is the grandmother of Libby. So Diener is the attorney. Stacy Diener is the attorney who's going to be doing the direct examination of Becky Patty. These are Andrea's observations of Diener. I mentioned she's a little soft spoken. It's hard to hear her, especially then she's also facing the witness away from the audience. And so, really, really straining to hear some of the details of her questions. From a style standpoint, she's really leading, and it's not going to matter yet. Like, they're not objecting, they're not calling her out because it doesn't matter at this point in time. But if they get to a point where it matters, it could potentially be a problem. Sometimes, when an attorney gets in the habit of being very leading with their questioning, it's hard to shift if they get called out and figure out how to get to where they want to go through an open-ended type of question. That's basically why people end up leading is because they're thinking this is where I need to go. So they just kind of start there and ultimately, put it in the witness's mouth. So you're not supposed to do that on direct. You don't get to lead on direct. You're supposed to ask open-ended questions. If the defense decides to start objecting to that at some point, assuming that Judge Gull will sustain an objection like that, which is kind of who knows at this point, then she's going to have to shift her style, I think, pretty significantly from what I saw today. Andrea's observations of Becky Patty, she was heartbreaking to watch. She really was the entire time. She is still grieving. It's very, very obvious. This was very painful for her. Her demeanor was flat, short answers, typically not really expounding and volunteering a lot or anything like that. Just even with, the state who's ostensibly friendly, supposed to be there advocating kind of for the victims, so it's just hard. It was hard. It was really hard to watch. She was suffering going through this. So let's keep that in mind. Poor Becky Petty. All right. It says, so they decided the background, or they described the background, the family, everybody who lived together with her and her husband, Mike. The two granddaughters, Kelsey and Libby, came to live with them around 10 years before, about 2007. So when Libby was about 3 years old. Also, Derek, Libby and Kelsey's father, Becky's son. So Derek is Derek German is Libby's father, so he came to live with his parents or his mom. Also Derek, Libby, and Kelsey's father, Becky's son. Becky's other son, Cody, was also living with them. She worked as a home appraiser and had a home office. Tara, Becky's daughter, and Derek, Becky's son, were both working for her at the same time. She worked every day, just regular Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 types of hours, had been going at it for 15 years as of 2017. Libby was in the 8th grade. She described Libby as very active, very smart. She did math bowl. She would have graduated a year early. She did sports, band, volleyball, swimming, softball, busy girl, soccer, pretty much year round. She was always doing something. Becky's daughter Tara had two boys, two sons that were the same age as Libby, her cousins. So they were very close. They did everything together, went to the same school and stuff like that. So Libby's cousins. Libby had a big circle of friends. She would spend the night with them. They would come over to her house. So Becky got to know a lot of Libby's friends, including Abby. Abby was a close enough friend that the German family took her on spring break vacation in Florida with them. Abby spent the night frequently. Hold on. All right. Where was I? Abby was close enough with that she went on vacations with them. She spent the night frequently. Moms knew each other and communicated and so forth. That year, Abby and Libby were both in the band. Abby and Libby both played volleyball together. Libby had just turned 14 in December of 2016. When Kelsey got her license, she would help out a lot. These are very busy girls. They need rides all the time, so Kelsey would help out with a lot of the driving them around. Becky gave Kelsey a car. It was a cream-colored Bonneville. Monday, February 13th, was a typical work day for her, but it was not a typical school day because they had the day off. Normally, Libby would not have friends sleep over during weeknights, during school nights, but because it was a day off, Abby had spent the night at their house the night before. It was a Sunday night. They had breakfast. Libby was asking if they could go do something, so Becky offered to pay the girls to help her do some filing, and then she would take them shopping. Kelsey said she had to work, but Libby wanted to go to the trails. Becky told her you would have to get a ride home. Libby then came out to speak with Becky and told her that her dad, Derek, had said that he would come and pick her up. So Libby got permission to go to the trails. Libby came out to the office to say goodbye to Becky, and Becky told her to take a jacket because it's warm, but it might get a little bit cold. The last thing Libby ever said to Becky was, "Grandma, I'll be okay." For breaking. They had just gotten a puppy, and Libby had been sitting there on the floor holding the puppy, playing with the puppy. Libby was wearing a tie-dyed shirt and gray sweatpants. Becky didn't pay attention to what Abby was wearing. She couldn't identify that. So they knew that Libby meant the High Bridge Trail because there's trees out there. Kelsey is a photographer and likes to take photos out there. They had always felt like it was a safe area and didn't have any concern about taking the girls out there on their own. They used to ride bikes out there together. Currently, the path had been developed. It's got an asphalt on it, but at the time there wasn't one. It was just gravel. The girls would always ask permission to go somewhere. Libby would always ask permission. She wouldn't just take off. She was very respectful of making sure that people knew where she was going and when. Libby had a phone so that when her practices were over and stuff, she would be able to get in touch and let them know that she needed a ride. Fully expected that Libby would have her phone with her on the trail because she always had it with her. She never left it. She never let it run out of charge. Libby made the arrangements for her father, Derek, to pick her up. She made those with him. Becky was not part of that process. That afternoon, Derek was working with Becky in her home appraisal business. He needed to go out and take photos of some houses that were like comps for an appraisal that she was doing in the Frankfurt area. It was going to take some time, 2.5 hours maybe, so he told Libby he could pick them up when he was done. They left for the trails, sorry. They left for the trails around 1:30 p.m. Becky knew that the kids had taken pictures on the high bridge. She hadn't seen it for herself, but she knew about it. Becky hadn't been out there herself. She knew that it was a trestle bridge. She didn't realize how high it was. She was surprised when she saw it. She was not surprised that Libby would go out on that bridge because Libby liked adventure. When they were on their vacation in Florida, Libby wanted to go parasailing. Libby wanted to try anything once. She was describing Libby's character a little bit as being polite, but she would not be afraid to tell somebody if they were out of line. Libby had very good interaction with adults. She was very, very smart. Becky said that Libby had more reasoning powers than Becky had as an adult. Libby was calm. She would say, I need to be a psychiatrist because all my friends come to me with their problems. She was a logical thinker. She loved crime shows, particularly one with a red-headed surgeon. Libby all liked that show, and she said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to help people solve crimes, or I'm going to heal people. Aw. It was important to Becky because her mom had died of COPD. Libby had a good tuition, uh, I think that means good intuition, not tuition, intuition, according to Becky. Becky's husband, Mike, is a first responder. He had always told the girls to be aware of their surroundings, be situationally aware, pay attention to your instincts, and things like that. Libby heard stuff like that a lot. That was ingrained in her. Libby would call if her plans would change or if she was going to be late or something like that. Libby was very good about notifying them. About 3:30 p.m., Derek called Becky and said, Libby's not answering her phone. He's here to pick her up and she's not here. Can you try her? Becky tried to call, tried to text. Nobody was getting an answer. This had never happened before. They knew that Abby didn't have a phone and this was just off. It was not normal for this to be going on. They knew that it was off, so they decided maybe they needed to go look for them. Becky called her husband, Mike, told him they were going out to the trails to look. Cody came and pulled up as well. They parked at the trail, so Cody, the other brother, Derek's brother, they parked at the trails. They knew if the girls had maybe decided to walk home, there were basically two ways that they could go. They checked those routes first. The girls were not there. They went to the Mears trailhead and parked. When they got there, Becky called AT&T and was on the phone with them a while to see if they could ping the phone. She said that they would not do it. She described the Mears trailhead, so AT&T would not ping her phone. That's gotta be law enforcement, I guess. She described the Mears trailhead a little bit. There's a farmhouse across the street, a small parking area, and there were a couple of cars there. When they walked around for a little bit and didn't find the girls, that's when they decided to call AT&T. At that point, it was starting to get dark. It's after 5 p.m., Mike said. We need to call the police. They were concerned because Libby is afraid of the dark. It was getting dark. Becky doesn't remember if she walked all the way out to the high bridge. She remembers her grandson, Aiden, Tara's son, Libby's cousin, was there too, but nobody was found. She tried to call Abby's mom, but wasn't able to reach her. She told Mike to call the police and said she was going to Abby's mom's house to try to find her. To get there, she would not have passed the camera at the Hoosier Harvest store. So she went to Abby's. She tried to call Abby's mom's phone. She didn't reach her, doesn't remember if she left a message. When she got there, the grandfather was there who said that Anna was at work. Anna is Abby's mother. She headed to Anna's workplace, and Anna called while Becky was on the way there. They agreed to go to the police station. They all met up at the police station. Police asked for a description. They asked for photos. She said she had last seen them at the house and believed them to be out at the High Bridge trails. She described what they were wearing. She was very specific about black Nikes, that Libby was wearing black Nikes. She originally said Libby was wearing gray sweatpants, but realized she wasn't because she was cleaning up Libby's room and she found the sweats. So she realized that she had changed at some point in time and didn't know, but her black Nikes she wore all the time. They were at the place, or I'm sorry, they were at the police station until well after midnight. When Mike came back, they went back to the trail. They drove around and continued to look. She lost track of her own car, not sure what happened to it in this whole process. They were continuing to try to call Libby's phone over and over. They went and got what AT&T records online she could find on the family's phones and shared them with law enforcement. At some point, they went home and went back out early the next morning. They went up at the firehouse where they were divided into groups. Each group had a leader for them to be able to do a grid search. So then the groups were assigned an area to search. Becky's area was just right down the road from her house. If the girls had tried to get home, they were searching in the fields out in the area just in case something had happened or they had gotten overlooked. They were away from the trails, so she was walking back to her car after they had searched that area when a friend came up and said they found them. So this is obviously the next morning when they did find them. So she ran to her car and she drove in her car over to the Mears trailhead. She ran up to a fireman and said, "Take me to Libby." He said no. So she turned around and she saw her sister Melissa was crying, and she ran up to Melissa and said, "Hey, they found them." And all Melissa could say was, I'm sorry," and she couldn't tell her anything. Mike came out and they went back to the truck. He sat her down in the truck while he went back to talk to somebody. Becky at this point is confused. She doesn't understand why nobody's talking to her, why they wouldn't take her to her. She saw the coroner's van go by, and that's how she knew that Libby was no longer alive. That's when she realized. They called the family up to the firehouse then and told them formally that Libby was deceased. It had not even crossed her mind when they told her initially that they found her, that she could be deceased. All right, so up next is Andrew Baldwin's cross examination. He didn't cross examine her extensively. None of the family members were cross examined extensively at all. He's basically just getting into their personalities. He said, "Was Libby the type of person who would stand up for herself, stand up for others, tell you what she would think, would she speak in a loud voice, things like that?" He asked her about seeing flashlights out looking for the girls. He also, again, confirming that that area was thoroughly searched, so the girls were not there at that time. He also confirmed that at some point Becky had been told about the hair found in Abby's hand, but she didn't remember the timing. She didn't remember if it was before Mr. Allen had been arrested or not. She confirms that just 2 days ago she provided DNA. She had provided it before, but she provided it again 2 days ago. So, not a whole lot there. But you don't want to ask the victim's family member, you don't want to, you want to avoid any kind of cross examination if you can, but you might have to ask a few questions. All right, so Diener redirects. She clarified that the flashlights that Becky Patty reported seeing during the search was when she was by her own house. She was away from the trails, and that she saw some while she was driving in the area of the CPS building and the highway, but she wasn't in the area where she would have seen flashlights near where Abby and Libby were found. She also confirmed that her husband has long guns. He hunts. People in the family do own handguns, but Libby was not around them. She didn't have exposure to them. And that is the rest of Becky Patty's testimony. Up next, we have Derek German's testimony. So, this is again the father of Libby. He is a local. He grew up there around Delphi. They live just outside of town. At this time, he wasn't working full time. He was working odd jobs, including helping his mom with the appraisal business, where he would take the pictures of for her. He did a lot of helping running Libby around. He said Libby always forgot something, so I guess like running things to and from where she was. Libby was in lots of activities, so he was constantly running to bring her a swimsuit, bring her food, etc. He was running out to the school often. He did not have Snapchat, so he would text with Libby. So Libby and Abby, I believe, mostly Snapchatted with one another. He would try to call Libby because he doesn't like texting, but Libby wouldn't answer and they would end up texting. Very familiar with Abby. Picked up Abby the night before, Sunday, to spend the night at their house. He picked Libby up from another friend's house Sunday as she had been at a sleepover Saturday night. Next morning, he made the banana pancakes that they ate for breakfast. He was painting a desk in the garage and then he left to take the pictures for his mother. I want to backtrack to the banana pancakes. If it is determined that she has banana pancakes in it, or that if they have undigested banana pancakes in their stomachs, then they may have possibly been taken sooner rather than later. Their lives taken sooner rather than later. But if most likely they were digested or they have something else in their stomachs, then most likely, um, they might have been, the crimes might have taken place much later in the day as to what the state is saying. He was painting a desk in the garage and then he left to go take pictures for his mother. This was around 1:20 p.m. He had 18 houses to photograph, so it was going to take a while. He, when he went about halfway there, where he was going to be taking pictures in Frankfurt, he received a phone call from Libby asking if he would be able to pick her up from the High Bridge. He explained to her that he was going to take a while and that it could be a couple hours and she would have to wait. He went and took all the photos and then headed straight back to Delphi. On the way to the trails, he did not pass the camera at the Hoosier Harvest store. He came from the opposite way. He had not been on the trails or the bridge before. He is not a hiker. He didn't spend time out there. He tried calling first when he was just a couple of minutes away. He didn't get an answer. When he gets to the entrance, he calls again, still not getting an answer. He saw that there were other cars parked there. He started walking around he started walking around the trail to see if he would find them. He ran into somebody at a junction point where multiple trails meet. He didn't know the man, but later learned his name was David McCain. He asked the man if he had seen two teenage girls. The man said no. Since the man had been coming from the direction of the Monon High Bridge and hadn't seen the girls, Derek went the opposite direction towards the Freedom Bridge. This was at 3:11 p.m. He looked at his phone data to get this time. He walked down towards the water on the Deer Creek Trail, but he didn't see anybody. He walked back towards the Freedom Bridge. He didn't see anybody. He continued to try to call Libby. He went back to his car and called his mom, Becky. She hadn't heard anything either. He called Libby again, gets no answer, calls his mom again, gets back to the trail, yelling the girls' names in all directions with no response. He goes back to his car, waits about 15 minutes, nothing. He goes back out and now he walks down to the high bridge. While he was sitting in the car, a couple of kids arrived and headed towards the high bridge. He followed the kids out there. He did not cross the bridge. He saw the kids sitting on what he described as a little deck on the side of the bridge. The little decks are about 4 feet by 6 feet. It was a boy and a girl that he saw. Kelsey and Cody then arrived, and they said they were going across the bridge. So he went back to the car. Kelsey had parked there, so he got in the car and was trying to figure out what to do next. Then Mike and Becky came and they had to park outside because at this point they couldn't fit any more cars in the parking lot. So they parked outside or parked across the street. Becky is making calls to AT&T. Derek goes back out to the trail. Cops and people are starting to show up before he made it back to the bridge. It's still light out when he went to the police station. Becky and Cody went downtown to look around after the police station so they could look at some of the parts of the trail system. They checked other sections of the trail that go through the downtown area. They didn't find anything. Derek walked back to the high bridge. It's dark now. When you approach the bridge, there's a wooded area to the left. He had a flashlight and was searching over that in that area. He did not find anything. He was by himself. He was not searching in a group at this point in time. He described that area as extremely steep down to the water. He did not go down to the water, he stayed up on the higher ground. He followed this wooded area down to where it ends in a ravine. The ravine runs south from the cemetery. He basically covered a large section that is west and beneath the cemetery over to the ravine. The ravine he described as being too steep to be able to cross. By this point, it was midnight. It was pitch black. He could see maybe 10 feet in front of him, not very good visibility, but you could see all the way into the other side. It was a high bank. They were continuing to search until about 12 a.m. He could see flashlights on the other side of the water until under the high bridge. He saw no flashlights on the far side of the ravine, the east side of the ravine. He stayed on the west side. He saw nobody on the east side of the ravine. He went back to his car. He went home. The next morning, he went out to search and got into a group. His group was responsible for searching the same area that he had searched the night before. He parked at the CPS building and walked through the Mears lot. He searched the forest alongside the trail all the way down until it met up with the bridge. His daughter was with them. Kelsey, I'm assuming. They went all the way to the ravine. He ran into his aunt Melissa, Becky's sister. Melissa is not in his group. He's not sure if Melissa was in a group at all, but she was out there searching at the end of the ravine. Melissa had come up behind them and said they needed to go back to the entrance. By the time he got back to the entrance, there were cars there. He could tell something was up. He could hear his mom screaming. Melissa came running off the trail screaming. He saw the coroner's van. He saw about 12 cops go by, or 12 cop cars go by. He told, or his dad, sorry, took Kelsey back and called her and told her what had happened. Now, Andrew Baldwin's cross-examination, he said he didn't know who was searching in what areas before then. He reiterated kind of the orientation of the trails and where exactly Derek ran into Dave McCain. His time is at 3:11 p.m. is when he made the first call to Libby, according to his initial testimony. This would have been when he was a couple minutes away. He estimated it was about 3:25 p.m. when he was coming from the high bridge and he saw the couple down there taking pictures. He didn't hear anything like screams or anything like that. He saw lots of lights between 10 p.m. and midnight. They were on the surface road, facing back towards the creek. It was bright enough to illuminate the opposite side of the creek. There were tons of people out looking for the girls. This area he described was not familiar to him. He had not spent time out there as a kid. This was not a place that he knew like the back of his hand or anything like that. I'm questioning this because isn't he a local? And he doesn't know this area? Like not even when he was a kid, did he hang out there or anything like that? Like I kind of find that hard to believe. I don't know. Just saying. Not that I'm saying that he's not a good witness or that he can't be trusted, but if he's a local, because that's the first thing it says is that he's a local, he grew up there around Delphi. So if that's true, how come he doesn't know anything about Monon High Bridge, never been there, never doesn't know anything about it? That's the only thing that kind of makes me wonder about his testimony. But other than that, like, you know, I have the greatest amounts of sympathy for the family members here. All right, last witness for day one was Kelsey Siebert, who is the older sister of Libby, and she's the one that dropped them off. So again, we've got Stacy Diener doing the questioning for direct examination. She says She was a junior in high school in 2017. Libby was in eighth grade. Kelsey was 17. So she's 3 years older than Libby. So now she now has gone to school and gotten a bachelor's in psychology. She's now married, has a daughter, has another one on the way. She described the school as being very small. Everybody knows everybody. She certainly knew Abby, and Libby were friends. Abby had gone on vacation with them, spent a lot of time at her house, knew that Abby didn't have her own phone, and Libby always let Abby use her phone. She described Libby's personality as always the outgoing one and very brave. She had gone out to the Monon High Bridge with Libby before the very first time either of them had gone out there. It was within the past year. She was terrified, and Libby was not scared at all. She crawled across on her hands and knees. She was terrified, but she wasn't going to let Libby go across alone, so she did it. She had not been out to that trail before with Abby. On February 13th, she had woken up late because they had the day off of school. They were asking if she could drop them off at the trails if they could get a ride back. It was not unusual for them to go there. It was a place that they all felt safe. She also confirmed Libby was wearing a tie-dyed shirt. She had given Abby one of her sweatshirts that was in the car, or that was in the back of her car. She described it as a swim sweatshirt. I think that means for the school swim team. It's a brand new sweatshirt. It hadn't been worn. That's weird. And why that detail, right? Isn't that a weird detail that she threw out there? Like, well, I gave her my sweatshirt. It was a brand new one. Why would you give away your brand new sweatshirt that hadn't been worn? I don't know. Anyways, Abby was wearing a gray zip-up jacket. Abby, I thought Libby. Libby was wearing a gray zip-up jacket, and Abby borrowed the sweatshirt. Or did she lend the sweatshirt to Libby? Now I'm confused. I thought she lent it to Abby. She had given Abby one of her sweatshirts, yeah. But then somebody's wearing a gray zip-up jacket. Somebody is taking Kelsey's sweatshirt. It's saying Abby twice, and one of these is Libby. I think Libby was wearing the gray zip-up jacket. She also remembered Libby grabbing something out of the car. Kelsey was also on the swim team. She described that she would keep changes of clothes and stuff in her car pretty regularly. She had a box in the back that had different pieces of clothing in it. On the way, they were playing music, they were laughing, they were taking selfies. Libby posted one of the selfies. This was admitted as an exhibit. Libby took it. She's in the front seat, and it's a very close up of her face, like just part of her face. You can see the back seat behind hers, Abby sitting in the back seat. A map was shown to the jury to show them where everything was. Basically, very big, blown up aerial photographs. Judge Gull was chastising the state a little bit. Ooh, good. Because, why? Why? Because they pulled out a big aerial photo and started to stick it up on the large easel facing the jury when it hadn't been entered yet. Oh, damn. How dare you show evidence that's not entered as an exhibit? All right. So at some point, they passed that camera at the Hoosier Harvest Store. Kelsey showed the jury where on the photograph the trailhead is, where the trail went, where the bridge is, etc. She was going to her boyfriend's house that day. She pulled into the entrance, which she described as very small. It angles kind of like a driveway. There's only room for maybe about two cars to park there. She pulled in, dropped them off, and then just continued on her way to her boyfriend's house. Thought she had to work, Kelsey. Now she's going to her boyfriend's house. I'm confused. They went out for lunch. I know Becky Patty had to work, but I thought Kelsey had work too, but I guess not. She was going to her boyfriend's house. They went out for lunch downtown and then went back to his house. Then they were when they then were leaving when she had to go to work. She did have to go to work. Okay, so I didn't make that up. She described that the phone was always in Libby's hand. Libby's a typical kid, a typical teenager, always had that phone in her hand, and that she was using it the way on the way to the trailhead. After Kelsey's boyfriend left for work, Grandma Becky had called Kelsey at about 4 p.m., and that's when Kelsey learned that Libby and Abby were missing. So she then went to town. Andrea has it written down that she went to the bridge at 6:40, but Andrea believes this must be written down wrong because it makes no sense. She says she went to the bridge. Everybody in the family was trying to call Libby's phone. She ended up going out to the bridge. She and Cody walked out to the high bridge and went across. Nobody else in the family went across the bridge. After they got to the end of the bridge, they turned to the left and went down to the driveway that goes underneath the bridge. They took the driveway in the opposite direction from Brad Weber's house, which is basically going downstream. The reason they went this way is because they thought Abby's house was kind of down in that direction. They thought maybe Abby and Libby started walking back to Abby's house or in that direction. They did not come across anyone. So Kelsey and Cody came back from the bridge. At that point, it was starting to get dark, but it was not dark yet. They thought at that point maybe the girls were out in the woods. It really didn't occur to them that maybe something bad had happened. Kelsey said that she and Libby sometimes texted, but they usually would communicate via Snapchat. She told the jury how Snapchat worked. The prosecution showed a drone video basically following the Monon High Bridge trail from where you would get onto the main trail from the Mears entrance all the way out to the Monon High Bridge and across the High Bridge to the end. The video was taken recently, so they did a drone basically to reenact the walk or something, is what they're trying to do. This was not something that they took at the time because the bridge had since been changed. Kelsey described some of the differences. The main differences are now the path is asphalted where it wasn't before. And as you approach the bridge, originally you just walked out to the original railroad ties. There were gaps in between them and no side rail. They've modified all this since 2017. They also used to be a barricade in front of the bridge. If you were coming down the trail, you would run into this barricade, but you would typically just go around it. The bridge is very long. The bridge is no longer than it looks when you walk up. The bridge is longer than it looks when you walk up to it, she said. All right, so by the way, you can see the fish in the water below the bridge. It is clear. It is extremely clear, very clear water because and this is important because Richard Allen said that he went there to watch the fish. He stayed and watched the fish for a while on that bridge. And it is confirmed you can see fish from that bridge. It's high up, but you can see them down in the clear water. So the bridge itself extends far beyond the creek. She testified that if you're at the far end of the bridge, you can't see somebody way back at the beginning. She gave the jury info about Snapchat, that you can text back and forth, you can send pictures, but things disappear after a certain length of time. If you just send a picture, it disappears after 10 seconds or something like that, but you can post things to your stories and then it can last for 24 hours. She saw that Libby had posted some Snapchat images to her story. The first was a picture of just the bridge. The second was a picture of Abby on the bridge. It looks like the same day according to her because it had the timestamps on it. She recognized the clothing that Abby was wearing. If somebody saves the image or screenshots it, Snapchat will notify you that had taken place, that somebody took a screenshot. She said she didn't otherwise hear from Libby that day. After her search at the bridge with Cody, she went to the police station. After the police station, she went home. She did not return to the trails that night, but continued to try to text and call Libby. The next day, she helped with the search. Her search group went back across the bridge and basically searched the same area that she had been in before. The only difference is they went down the right hand side of the end of the bridge instead of the left side. They were searching in that area and were just getting ready to head back when someone told them that they had found the girls, somebody who was closer to the creek. She didn't know who it was, but it was somebody who was young. There was a woman named Michael. There was a woman named Michael who was also there with Kelsey, that Kelsey had met at school before. A woman named Michael? Okay. She didn't know at the time if they were alive or dead, just that they had found the girls. She went back across the bridge and reiterated that she had no reason to be concerned about their safety when she had dropped them off at the trail that day. Now, finally, and on to Andrew Baldwin's cross-examination, and then we'll wrap it up. I don't think there's a direct, no, or a redirect. So Andrew Baldwin cross-examination. This was interrupted by somebody in the back row of the audience who stood up out of her seat with her hand up and was standing there a few minutes, like raising her hand to talk to Judge Cole. Judge Cole eventually saw her and told her to sit down. The woman said the microphone wasn't pointed towards the witness, and Judge Cole says, "You need to sit down, ma'am," twice. All right, then. Interesting. She described where the Hoosier Harvest store was on the map. She indicated she would have passed that camera after she dropped Abby and Libby off. It was right there on her way going into town. She also reiterated that Libby was outspoken, that Libby would absolutely stand up to others. Libby was not afraid to raise her voice. Libby had a good, strong voice, which all to me means she would scream or yell or you know, yell profanities at somebody if they were trying to hurt her or her friend, if she could. So I think that they're trying to point out the fact that the sound carries everywhere. You can't be quiet around here. And Libby wasn't quiet. She would have said something. She would have done something. She would have been loud. She would have tried to react if she had been there. So it was around 4 p.m. that she found out the girls were missing, and the search was after that. She connected. See, that's why that 6:30 p.m. doesn't make sense either that she had written down. She connected with her uncle Cody, and the reason they went directly to the bridge. Hold on. All right, my dog getting antsy for his dinner. So I gotta wrap this up. Good thing we're almost done here. All right, so it was 4 p.m. when she found the girls. She connected with her uncle Cody, and the reason they went directly to the bridge was because of snap the Snapchat photo that Libby posted to her Snapchat story. Oh, so she put it on her story so they knew she had been on that bridge last. So they knew the girls had been there and that was the last information they had about their locations. She described this bridge as having such big gaps in it that there were spots people could fall through, that the ties were rotting. So this bridge was not in good condition. It's like an old train track, I believe. So it's like the pieces of wood, whatever they're called, the planks, they would be like, you know, spread out. They're not, there's gaps in between. It's not like a full-on bridge for people to walk on. So it's in disrepair. So it's not in the greatest condition and there's no railings. You could fall off on either side. So I wouldn't do this bridge if you paid me $1 million. But other people like Libby are brave souls. All right, so this is why the first time she came across, she did so on her hands and knees. She said, "No way could you run across or be able to. It's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous bridge. You would not be able to run across it." Some time is now spent in court looking at the pictures of Abby on the bridge. Kelsey has seen the photo many times. Libby was in front, turns around to take pictures of Abby, and is therefore facing the direction of the beginning of the bridge. I think we've all seen this. Kelsey can tell they are not very far from the uh, across the bridge because you can still see the water from the creek, so they haven't crossed very far into the bridge at that point. She estimated it was about 25% of the way across the bridge. The state objected to that as speculation, and that was sustained, so that was stricken. The jury doesn't get to hear that specific bit, even though they already heard it. So, but they have to forget that they heard it, which is like impossible. The defense introduced the photo of Abby on the bridge as an exhibit. The defense made a whole bunch of copies to distribute to the jury so that they could have their own copies. Later on, Ms. Diener popped up to ask if they could make a copy of their exhibits for the jury as well. Judge Gull told her that yes, of course you can. Of course, you're going to be nice to the prosecutors. God, I hate Judge Gull and I hate Judge Canoni. So the state made copies of the first exhibit, the selfie taken in the car by Libby, and gave them to the jury. You can see in the photo that there's nobody on the bridge behind Abby. Kelsey would see people from school out there all the time. This was a common place for kids to go. This was like the hangout for the kids in the area. Kelsey saw two people that she knew from school out there when she had returned to search with Cody. It was not uncommon for people to be on that bridge at any point in the afternoon. She confirmed that the sweatshirt Abby had taken out of her car was new. It had not been worn, but she said that they probably would have washed it. Okay. You guys wash your sweatshirts before you wear them? I don't. That like makes them not as soft. I don't know. She also confirmed that she gave her DNA 2 days ago, and it was not the first time that she had provided it. So she also gave her DNA. So that's the last of testimony. Real quick, the jurors get to ask questions, which I find always fascinating to hear what their questions are because it makes you think like, well, ooh, what are they thinking about? So, day one, there were two questions asked, and we don't have answers. So, I'm thinking they weren't given an answer because of whatever reason they're not allowed to. So, question: is it common for people walking the trail to stop at the high bridge and turn around? I can see why that's not allowed to answer that because what expert's going to testify to that? And then, jury question number two: is there a trail to go down to the creek instead of going up to the bridge? Again, you probably need like a Parks and Rec person or somebody to like testify to the park and the trails and all that. And you would need an expert in that area. And I don't think they have that. So that's why those questions were unanswered. We have questions for day two, but I will save that for the next video. We will stop it here, and I will see you guys in the next video, hopefully. The next videos will be a lot shorter. This had a lot more meat to it because we had really good notes and we had opening statements, which obviously take a little bit longer in time. So the next, recaps, hopefully we might not go so long. But if we have really good notes and people are giving us good notes that are boots on the ground, then I will keep continuing to read through them because I find that it's fascinating and we need to shine light on this case in particular because when the judge and the prosecutor and the law enforcement all are so secretive about a case, that means you really need to look at the case because there's something they don't want you to see. So we really need to pay attention to cases like this. And this isn't the only one in our country. This one is very similar to Karen Reed's case, only Richard Allen didn't have money and he sat and rotted away in prison for 2 years, which could have been Karen Reed's fate if she didn't have means to afford attorneys and bail herself out of jail. So, totally different situations, similar lines of defense in the way that, they're being set up, they're being framed, whatever, and law enforcement may even have a part in it, and definitely in Karen Reed, but probably in this. And they came out with their theories, their defense strategies way early on, which that may hurt them. It may not. We know it hurt Delphi in this case because They're not allowed to speak about Odinism and all the other suspects, not name them anyways, unless it comes in some other way. But at this point, they're not supposed to. So very limited in that. That's unfortunate because that really is their defense. So you guys all know how I feel about Gaul. If you've been watching my channel, I can't stand her. So I will leave it at that. We will pick it up next time with day two, testimony, recap, and whatnot, and go from there. I'm going to probably be like a day or two behind on each day just because I'm kind of waiting for everybody's notes and things to get in so that I have a good source for you guys so that when I come on here, I'm prepared and I can give you like a good recap. So I might be a day or so behind, but I want to give you like the updated notes and everything like that. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you for being here. Please hit the like button on your way out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye now. Whoops.